This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Joel Lazarovitz, VP of Franchise Recruitment with Maid Brigade. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Yeah. So I'm interested in learning about your background in franchising. You co-founded International Franchise Services back in 2006. You've been assisting Maid Brigade with their franchise recruitment for well over a decade. How did you get into the franchise space?
It's funny. I actually gave a speech, half in French, half in English, about my background way back when I was 26 years old, I think. And from there, I was hired by a company in the children's education space that was relatively new. I knew very little about franchising at that time, but I knew a lot about business, and I always loved business. So started with them. They had 5 or 6 franchises. 10 to 11 years later, we'd opened 225 in 25 countries, pioneered the launch. And so that was my introduction to franchising was by chance, quite frankly. But then from there, I guess I'd be considered a franchise lifer of sorts, but I've been within, in the sector for just about 25 years, since 1997. So I absolutely love it. And what ended up happening was that after those 10, 11 years with that one company, I realized that there was a lot of ignorance, especially when it came to international development. And that could be Canada, it could be overseas. There were a lot of companies that just felt if you opened a franchise anywhere in the US or Canada, you could duplicate those same efforts in other countries. And I, just given disclosure laws and rules and regulations, I knew was the furthest thing from it. So we formed our own company called International Franchise Services, where we were helping franchisors grow globally. It led to me now having introduced brands in over 65 countries, which is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And took on different clients in a variety of different sectors, primarily initially in the children's education space, but then it bled over into other sectors of franchising, because at the end of the day, franchise model is still a franchise model. And I was able to really help a lot of franchisors grow their brand, both globally and domestically, obviously.
The global side is really interesting because you and I have that in common from the standpoint of getting in the industry around the same time. I started my franchising business in 2006. Feels like a lifetime ago, but you go through all these different permutations of what activities you participate in the franchise space, and the international landscape is just pretty unique, and not a lot of people play in that sandbox. So really cool to see that you did a lot of that throughout your career. So now we're here to talk about your concept, Maid Brigade. So tell us, what is Maid Brigade?
So I've had the pleasure of working with Maid Brigade for, like you said, over a decade, and we're one of the leaders in residential cleaning. Essentially, most people, when they think of franchising, it's glamorized, and they think of the big food brands and things along those lines. But as most people know that are involved in franchising now, there's been a huge uptick when it comes to home services. It's just growing leaps and bounds. So Maid Brigade was founded way back in 1985, and the idea of our chairman at the time was to really dive into the residential cleaning space, because at that point it was really more commercial that was focused on than anything else. And so it was providing homeowners that didn't have the time to clean, someone that would come in, either a team of 2, like in our case, and would clean their home every second week, where they knew 26 weeks a year, you would have a customer, you would clean their home, and they'd be able to, not have to worry about coming home to a second job. So that started in 1985. It grew to where we now have over 370 territories that are littered all across the United States. And it's a company with a ton of longevity. We have some really, really unique, tools that other franchisors in our space don't have, like disinfection solutions and some other areas that I can focus on, as we continue our discussion. But it's really focused on the residential cleaning space with some light commercial, as
Yeah,
well.
very cool.
So we've been one of the leaders in what many people would describe as a crowded space, but there's a ton of room because everyone wants to get their home cleaned by someone else and not themselves.
Absolutely. So obviously, as you mentioned, it's a pretty big industry, the residential cleaning segment. So of the options out there, why would an entrepreneur choose Maid Brigade as their franchisor?
It's a great question. And there's a variety of them, answers, I would say. Number one, our uniqueness. 2, 3 years prior to the pandemic, we were looking for ways to separate ourselves from that crowded space, and we were able to find disinfection solutions using electrolyzed water. It's just been a game changer for us. It creates the purest, most hygienic cleaning available. You'll go into a home, you'll clean their home, and then you'll take the electrostatic charger. Picture your son or your daughter spraying their friends with a water gun, and then you're spraying. It could be hard to reach places like light fixtures or in between appliances, but also easy to reach places like countertops, where it actually adheres to the surface, kills all the bacteria and germs. 5 to 7 minutes later, you don't even have to wipe it away. Before, people thought we did this because of COVID. We were just trying to be forward thinking and figure out a way that was different than anyone else in the industry. And so by using these, the disinfection solutions, by being able to offer that to people throughout COVID, I don't want to say our business thrived, because I think all businesses were challenged during COVID, but we came out of it with people really, really focused on the health and the well-being of their family. So even though they wanted to put it in the rearview mirror that COVID was gone, the health and safety of their loved ones was still paramount to them. So being able to use these disinfection solutions as part of our regular clean, not as we're not marking up our pricing or anything along those lines. It goes into our regular clean. If you have that, as opposed to using chemicals, sponges, things that are just going to spread germs, people still want to use what we have to offer. So that's one big difference maker. The second big difference maker is, I think, how we train our franchisees. A lot of people, when in franchising, will bring you to their head office. You'll sit down for 5 days. You'll go through classroom training, and it's impossible to retain every ounce of information you learn. We have so many great mentors in our system where they will go and spend 3 to 4 days shadowing a 7-figure franchisee and really taking the time to be able to get to know what it takes to become a good franchisee and what best practices they want to emulate as well. So having the unique disinfection solutions we have, the training, the culture within our system, and I know that's a term that's overused constantly right now in franchising, but we have a tremendous culture where we really have a family of franchisees that are constantly sharing information. We're not owned by private equity. There's a lot of companies in our space that are owned by private equity. So because of that, it's a lot more rigid. We're more of a family, and we work really closely with our franchisees. So we bring on partners that we know will contribute to the overall growth of our brand, and will share information and be willing to share with other franchisees. So I think it's just a community of franchisees, and with the disinfection solutions and our unique training, it kind of separates ourselves in a number of areas as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned that obviously pandemic is something that everyone's trying to put in the rearview mirror, and it's becoming less and less relevant in day-to-day conversations, but it's still there. But I understand that there was it kind of marked an evolution in Maid Brigade's franchise model. So can you explain what kind of led using kind of what you used in a mostly residential business model and started capturing more market share in the commercial side of the business?
Absolutely. So, COVID hits, and obviously everyone's affected, and there's a lot of gray in terms of, are you considered to be an essential business? Are you not an essential business? Can you come into my home? Do I want you in my home? Are you going to wear a mask? And so a lot of question marks that come about it. What ends up happening is we start getting calls from bars, restaurants, doctor's offices, dental offices saying, we know you have these disinfection solutions. We want to give peace of mind to our patrons. Can you come in and clean our bar, clean our restaurant, and some of our franchisees were going and charging $200 to $300 for 20 minutes of work. So when you have these, the disinfection solutions that will give peace of mind to the patrons of these various establishments, you create a new section on your website called commercial disinfection. And that's exactly what we did. And we really made sure, and we had franchisees that were going in out of their own goodwill, going into firehouses, police stations, disinfecting them free of charge. Why? Because it was the right thing to do, at that time. So a lot of them were really involved in community, made a difference in a lot of businesses, and we're able to add that as another stream of revenue. So it's allowed many of our franchisees to be able to go in and to pick up additional revenue in areas where otherwise I don't want to call them ignored, but let's just say that really weren't focused on as much as they could have been, when COVID hit, obviously.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about, from Maid Brigade's perspective, what do you guys look for in a franchise owner? What does your ideal candidate look like that's going to be a good match for your culture?
I would tell you that an ideal catch for us is someone who is very people-oriented, someone who understands, because ultimately you're contributing to your community, you're hiring and training people, you're employing them, they're going out in teams of two. You have to be comfortable getting out there, and it could be joining a B&I networking group, it could be sponsoring a local sports team, it could be going out and just being involved in community, and and knowing that they know that you're there and you service their community. Because the first time they see you, if you're driving around in, let's say, a Maid Brigade vehicle with vehicle wrap, oh, Maid Brigade's in my community. The second time they see you, it's, oh, there's Mike, he services our community. So being willing to be a servant of sorts to the community and being comfortable hiring and training. I almost say we're more of a people business than a cleaning business. And the reason I say that is because you're always hiring and training people that are going to go out into your community, to people's homes to clean. So we're looking for people to have those interpersonal skills that can deal with both employees and customers. And that leads to sales and marketing driven people. It could lead to people with an HR background, but they just need to have those interpersonal skills to really be able to deal with their employees and the community at large.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Great. Thanks for sharing that with us. So let's revisit and talk a little bit about the competitive advantages of the model. You talked a little bit about your proprietary cleaning method. What else kind of separates you guys from the pack as it relates to competitive advantages in the residential and commercial cleaning space?
And I may be a bit redundant here, but certainly the commercial, certainly the disinfection solutions, I apologize, are something that separates us without question.
Right.
The other part I would say, and I said it earlier, it's just the culture. Like, we've had people that have come to us and they've been evaluating. It's not a secret. When someone's looking at Maid Brigade, they're probably looking at 3 or 4 other cleaning franchises as well. They've come and they felt that we're a community of franchisees. The franchisees validate. They're people that have been with us we have franchisees been with us 30 years, which is crazy when you think about that, right?
Yeah, you and I worked together with one who, that's kind of neat that the system's at a stage, being around for 40 years, where, there's a lot of retirees. People are ready to, go and have their exit. And you and I worked together with a candidate that was ready to breathe fresh life into a business and kind of take it over. So that's kind of neat to see that those opportunities exist with a mature brand like Maid Brigade.
They do. And it's flattering when we have people that have been with us 10, 20, 30 years that are volunteering to be mentors to others. They want to give back to the community. So it's very much, I would share with you, beyond the disinfection solutions, it's the culture we've created where countless times people have come to me and said, listen, I evaluated these other businesses, but I came and visited you guys for Discovery Day, spend time in your Atlanta office. Your president's been there 22 years, your VP of operations been there 17 years, you've been there 12 years. The continuity that you have within your system is something that I want to be part of. And obviously they like the culture and they like the community, and I think it draws a lot of people because of that.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit more about the training, the ongoing support, the marketing assistance. So a new franchisee evaluates the landscape of residential cleaning franchise systems. They believe Maid Brigade's got the great culture, the right economics. This is the one they're investing in. What happens then? Tell us a little bit about how you get them up to speed with your initial training program and how you support them and provide them with kind of services where they can generate great clients and maintain those relationships.
Sure. So as we discussed earlier, we have a 4-day training. So initially what happens is, let's say they've gone through our process. They've come in for Discovery Day. I call it the Mutual Admiration Society. If everyone likes each other very, very much, then they become a franchise partner. From there, they're going to go to a neighboring franchisee's location. We're fortunate we have 370 territories, so chances are there'll be one close by. where they'll spend 4 days with them and they're shadowing them. They're learning everything there is to know from, marketing, advertising, hiring and training of employees, you name it, and then by the time they leave there, they're really understanding what it takes to be successful. Then they need customers. We have a digital media team that's focused on working with them. There's always an advertising budget that's allocated where the franchisees will invest on a monthly basis, but we're going to do research for them and show them what we think will be best practices for them to be able to get customers. Is it SEO? Is it PPC? Is it mailers? Is it door hangers? Every market's different. We're not going to paint everyone with the same brush. So they work really closely with our digital media team, and then we're going to share with them what those best practices are and what we think will yield the best results to bring their customer acquisition costs down as much as possible. So we get very involved. Once they complete that first 4-day training, then Greg, who's our VP of Operations, or one of his team members, will come down shortly thereafter and do a 3 to 4 day training to train their first group of employees. They'll go into an actual home and clean. So I would tell you that our training is pretty intensive, but it's intensive in the sense that they're going to learn how to run a business, both in practice and in theory, and to make sure that, we're giving them all the tools they need to be successful. And then we're always following up with them. There's regular calls, there's additional visits, support visits. There's a convention where franchisees share best practices and make presentations. So we have a national, we have an ad council, we have a FAC group, Franchise Advisory Council. So they're always able to share their thoughts, but at the same time, we're there to help support them every step of the way.
Yeah, that's great. So there's, lots of talk, it seems more often than not, about an economic recession. Are we in one? Are we about to be in one? How does Maid Brigade respond to that when a candidate asks, is this a recession-resistant business?
Yeah, we get asked that a lot, especially in 2007, 2009, and probably a couple of other years. But I would tell you that even myself, having been immersed in franchising for as long as I have, I looked at it and I thought to myself, even when I first started with Maid Brigade, is this something that's going to, stand the test of time? Are people going to curb their spending? And what we found is that people wouldn't go out as often to eat. They wouldn't buy the additional luxury item, but they just didn't want to clean their home. They just
You're
don't
still going
want
to get that home clean, trust me.
And so, yeah, it's
I have 2 teenagers. We need our house clean.
Yeah, and that's, listen, I have 2 teenagers as well. And the truth is that they will compromise in other areas. No one wants to come home to a second job. If anything, what came out of COVID is people put a bigger priority in spending time with loved ones and spending time with friends and really valuing that free time. And there's not a lot of it, right? Everyone's busy. They don't want to clean their home. So will our numbers go down slightly in a recession? I would say yes. Will they go down significantly? Absolutely not. So I would say we're pretty much recession proof when it comes to it, because all businesses are affected. We're not affected like a lot of the other ones. Definitely not.
Very cool. So let's talk about the item 7. What is the initial investment to get started as a Maid Brigade franchise owner? And then what are the basic major categories of expense to get this thing going?
Sure. So we have a franchise fee that's $40,700. That's for a typical territory that has around 30,000 homes that earn above $100,000 a year. That's very important for us because we want to make sure if we're selling a franchise and someone's opening up a business, that the area could support a franchise. You have equipment and supplies that'll be around $4,600. So your upfront cost to get started, you're looking at just over $46,000. However, you need to have a marketing budget. So our franchisees will typically spend on average around $4,000 a month in advertising and marketing, because there is a cost to acquire a customer and you need to be relevant in searches. If people are putting in keywords and then you show up on page 12, that's a problem, right? Sure. So you need to make sure that people know that you exist. So I always say our franchise total investment will always range somewhere in that $100,000 to $125,000 range, but that's including the marketing dollars that you're setting aside. It's including getting a small office in a commercial area. I have so many people that come to me and say, oh, you know what? I found a beautiful office in the heart of my downtown core. And I'll say, okay, stop everything you just said. No one's coming to your office. There's no reason to have a fancy office. Get one in a commercial area that's closer to your employees, that is near an artery of highways, that makes it easier for them to get to their
So like some flex space in an industrial environment would be
exactly.
appropriate. And that's where your employees are picking up their supplies, maybe opportunity to park the vehicles, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Okay. So let's look at the flip side. You're operating. Let's talk a little bit about the item 19. What can you share with us regarding financial performance?
We're very fortunate that we have a long track record with Maid Brigade, and that, our average franchisee right now is doing just over 800,000 a year in revenue.
Wow.
So it's something that we're incredibly proud of. I know a lot of people look at franchise disclosure document as a deterrent to getting a deal done. For us, we see it as a more than happy to share how our franchisees are performing, what range, because there's all different levels and tiers, but it's the reason we have such great franchise validation is that we have people that contribute constantly to the greater good, helping other franchisees grow, sharing those best practices, and growing a significantly large business. So,
yeah, I mean, 800,000 is a great average. So, most of the candidates I work with obviously look at, I want to be a top performer in the system. So have you kind of looked at what the top half or top third perform and what that kind of top sales volume looks like?
We have what we call level 1, level 2, level 3. And I would say your top ones are going to be in that anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7, 1.8.
And is that for a single territory, or is that some with multiple territories?
It's some from, I would say it's multiple. We have
kind of
some, we have some that are doing, and I'm assuming I'm allowed to say this because it's in item 19. So, we have some that are, generating 7 figures in one. So it's feasible. Will it happen overnight? Of course not. It takes a lot of hard work, and and we realize no one wakes up in the morning and says, my dream is to own a cleaning franchise. But there's something to be said for old reliable, something to be said for something where you add a customer, and it's really easy math, because if you're charging, let's say $170 to clean a home, or $180 on average every 2 weeks, you multiply that by 26 weeks. How do you add to your bottom line? You add customers. So it's not a complicated model, right? It's not and you're going to get
that recurring revenue is,
and it's a recurring revenue where you're building residual revenue. So it's so we're fortunate. We have a lot of multi-unit franchisees because they're people that have grown with us, and we're big believers in, if someone grows a big business, they should be rewarded for doing that. It's also why we have even our royalty is a sliding scale. It started 6.9, it goes as low as 3.5. We're big believers, and if someone grows a big business, they should pay a smaller royalty and really reap the rewards of their efforts as well.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of candidates love those two boxes you just checked, which is recurring revenue and getting a discount when they perform in terms of the lower royalty rate. So you guys have been around since 1985. Do you still have any white space? Is it good territory for new owners to come in and secure?
We do. We still have well over 200 territories. So I think one of the biggest misperceptions in most companies that have been around for a long time is they've been around forever. They have no territories left. Couldn't be further from the truth. We've carved out, I think, anywhere between 220 to 260 territories where we can put successful franchisees. I'll also share with you, we came up with a new model this year for second-tier territories. Maybe ones that don't have 30,000 qualified households, they have 20,000. Maybe it's in a college town that doesn't have the same density of population, but they still need to have homes cleaned. So we have a second model there where the franchise fee is $27,000 for that. So it's something we've just implemented this year, and it's being received really, really well as well.
Yeah, and having 200 plus territories still available, that definitely shows that there's still opportunity with the Maid Brigade concept. So this has been great, Joel. Anything else before we part ways? Anything you want to add to the conversation?
No, I just appreciate the time. It's always nice to be able to talk about Maid Brigade and who we are and what we're all about. And, I think for us, we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to scale and grow. For anyone who's looking at a business, don't just rule out residential cleaning and think, it's just old and tired. It's a business that can be grown and scaled, and everything in home services now, it's not a secret. It's just growing leaps and bounds. We're no different. So if you're looking for a business with good support, great culture, something you'd be proud of being part of our community, I would look at Maid Brigade, and I just appreciate the time to be able to explain more about it.
Absolutely. Well, if you'd like to connect with Joel to learn more about the process to own a Maid Brigade territory, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you connected with him. Thank you so much, Joel, for taking the time to jump in the huddle and speak with us today about Maid Brigade.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.